Hey guys, Mike here, and in this video we're going to compare the ASUS Zenbook UX301LA with the ASUS Zenbook UX302LG in their top configurations. In other words, we'll have side by side the two most powerful ASUS Zenbooks available right now. The UX301LA, or the so-called Zenbook Infinity, is the sleekest of the two, comes with a high resolution screen and a 28Wh Intel Core i7-4558U processor with Intel Iris graphics. On the other hand, the UX302LG is a bit thicker and heavier, but offers more ports and a dedicated Nvidia graphics chip. On a first look, the two are similar in many ways. Gorilla Glass 3 covers the lids in both cases, and we do have the navy blue versions of these two laptops here for our video. However, while the UX301 is entirely dressed in blue, as the interior, the underbelly, the keyboard and the trackpad are painted in this color, the UX302 uses blue only for the lid cover, while the body gets a dark grey look and the keys are black. In fact, there's a different choice in the materials used for the body. On the UX301, the bottom and the edges are made from some sort of ceramic coated metal, while most of the interior is covered in a matte layer of glass. The UX302 settles for a more common aluminum shell, with a nice feel and texture similar to what we've seen on last year's Zenbooks. Regardless, all these details might not matter that much to you, as at the end of the day, both machines are beautiful. The fact that the Zenbook UX301 is slightly slimmer and lighter than its close relative might matter more though, despite the fact that the differences are small. The UX302 is about 2mm thicker and weighs about 60 grams more. On the other hand, the UX301 feels sturdier, tougher, as on the UX302 both the lid and the sheet of metal covering the underbelly tend to flex when grabbing the laptop. With the larger body, the UX302 can accommodate more ports on the sides. That's why you do get 3 USB slots on this one, a full-size HDMI connector and what looks like a potential Thunderbolt port based on the logo next to it. That's not confirmed though, and it could be just a regular mini DisplayPort. On the UX301 there's only room for 2 USB slots plus 1 micro HDMI and 1 mini DisplayPort connector. Besides that, you do get card readers on these two, but none can fit an entire SD card. And in order to boost the connectivity options even further, there are USB to LAN and mini DisplayPort to VGA adapters included in the pack with both of these. As for the PSU, on the UX301 it is placed on the left edge, while on the UX302 is placed on the right. And personally I like the first approach better, as it leaves more space towards the right where I tend to have my mouse. Anyway, let's move on and have a look at the interiors. Except for the choice in materials, there's a similar layout on both of these with the same keyboard arrangement and the trackpad in the middle. On the UX302 you get a small status LED in the top right corner, while on the UX301 you don't. Back to those similarities though, the screen frames and hinges are almost identical on the two laptops, which are quite well balanced and you can easily lift up the screen with just a single hand, while the body stays nicely in place. The two hinges found one on each side of the laptops are narrow, but sturdy and firm. And the two Zenbooks both lift on the small feet on the bottom of the lid covers when leaning the display towards the back, which allows a better airflow towards the cooling grills on the bottom. The cooling systems are in fact similar as well, with the air being sucked from the bottom and then pushed through the metallic mesh between the two hinges towards the user and towards the screen. Speaking of that, let's turn our attention on those two screens. We have 13-inch touchscreens covered by Gorilla Glass 3 on both of these. However, most UX301 versions are equipped with a 2560 by 1440 pixel IPS ISO panel, while on the UX302 we have the more common 1920 by 1080 pixel IPS panel, which is also available on the UX301 but only for the cheapest models. The latter is clearly not bad, offering good brightness levels and contrast, plus rich and saturated colors. The ISO panel though is sharper and brighter. The colors are not as rich as on the IPS panel found on the UX302, at least in my opinion, but they look more natural. On top of that, there's none of that light bleeding with this panel, something still present on the UX302's display and something I've encountered on all past Zenbooks I've ever tested. All in all, both laptops offer high quality display and you'll be more than happy with either of them, but the UX301 does have an edge over the UX302 here. On the other hand, the higher density panel can be problematic, given Windows 18 abilities to scale up fonts and content properly, which means that occasionally you'll struggle with tiny interface elements. But how about the keyboards? They are identical on the two laptops with minimal differences in terms of colors and the coating on top of each key, which is slightly softer on the UX301. That aside, you do get the same feedback, backlighting system and layout, with the small arrow keys and the power button integrated in the top right corner. Overall though, I was satisfied with these keyboards despite the rather shallow travel and the fact that the space key is annoyingly squeaky on both of them. The click pads are good enough as well, large and with a smooth and accurate glass surface. The two pads are similar, with only minor aesthetic differences between them. Alright, all those being said, let's go ahead and power on the two laptops. Both boot up fast, as you can see here. Hardware-wise, the UX301 packs a 28Wh Intel Core i7 processor with Iris graphics 8GB of RAM and 2 SSDs in RAID 0. It uses NGFF SSDs and the memory is soldered on the motherboard, thus non-upgradable. The UX302 is more upgrade friendly. Our version comes with the Intel Core i7-4500U processor, Nvidia 730M dedicated graphics, 6GB of RAM and a 2.5-inch 7mm SSD. The storage unit can be removed and replaced, and there's also one accessible half-size mSATA connector that leaves more room for upgrades. As for the memory, the laptop can take a total of up to 10GB of RAM, as you do get 2GB soldered on the motherboard and a free slot that can take an up to 8GB module. Performance-wise, the UX301 is speedier than the UX302 when it comes to raw CPU power, both in benchmarks and in everyday use. For instance, in the next seconds I'll show you that this laptop archives a selection of pictures or edits a video sequence faster than the UX302. The two SSDs combined in RAID 0 also help it achieve faster speeds when moving files from one place to another. In my example, I'm moving about 2GB of multimedia content between partitions. But that's something that can be addressed with further upgrades on the UX302. All in all, both laptops can easily deal with everyday activities, including browsing, multitasking between several apps or running movies. However, when it comes to gaming, the dedicated graphics chip on the UX302 shows its strength. I've tested titles like BioShock Infinite, Skyrim, Dirt 3, Grid 2 or StarCraft 2 on both of these, and while the UX301 can run them fairly well on 30x7 resolution with low details, the UX302 runs them even smoother on 19x10 resolution. I have two different videos on the channel showing the gaming performances of these two laptops, and I'll advise you to check them out. At the same time, you'll find more details on the site as well on ultrabookreview.com, where I'll also have some benchmark comparisons. There is a link to that written comparison in the description below, if you're interested. Okay, so we know that both these laptops are pretty fast for their classes, but how about temperatures and noise levels? For starters, you should know that there are two fans inside each of these ultrabooks and you'll hear them when pushing the laptops. However, the UX301 is slightly louder than the UX302 under load, at least based on what my non-professional iPhone app is telling me, as you can see here. At the same time, hardware monitor and similar pieces of software show higher temperatures recorded for the internals on the UX301, with the CPU going over 90 degrees Celsius, while on the UX302, in similar conditions, it barely passes past 70. Those numbers are reflected on the outside as well, as both laptops tend to get hot on the bottom and on the area on top of the keyboard, but the palm rest and the actual keyboard remain fairly cool. When used lightly though, the UX301 is mostly passively cooled, with the two fans turning completely off. That happens on the UX302 as well, although they do kick off from time to time. Okay, with this out of the way, there are two more important aspects to consider. The battery life is one of those. Both laptops pack 50Wh batteries, although in slightly different versions. Even so, with everyday use, you can expect around 6 to 7 hours of life with both of these. That can get closer to 8, maybe 9 hours when using them lightly with the screens dimmed off, or can barely get to 90 minutes on a charge when playing games. As for which one of these two lasts longer on a charge when performing the same tasks, well, that's a tough question to answer, as it really depends on what exactly you'll be doing on them. I'm still running tests and I'll share the results with you in the written comparison. Okay, so we've finally reached the end of this comparison, but we're not drawing the line before mentioning the prices. The top UX301LA configuration that we have here is going to sell for somewhere around $2,200, while the UX302LG, also the top configuration available, is going to sell for around $1,600. At the same time, the base version of these two laptops with the same Intel Core i5 processor, 4GB of RAM, 128GB SSD and similar Full HD screens start at about $1,400 for the UX301 and close to $1,200 for the UX302. Or in other words, no matter how you're looking at this, the Zenbook UX301 is significantly more expensive than the UX302. For that, you're getting a marginally slimmer and lighter device, the sturdier and more carefully polished body and the higher resolution screen. The 28Wh hardware platform is only available for the top configuration. On the other hand, with the UX302, you get more ports and the dedicated graphics. In the end, it's up to you to choose between these two. On a first look, there aren't as many differences between them, but when getting in depth, you'll find plenty of details that could steer you towards one or the other. I for one am still torn between them, but I'm leaning more towards the UX302, which runs cooler, offers the superior graphics and is much more affordable. But I'd like to know which one would you pick between these two and why, so make sure to leave your replies below. Okay, and that's about it for now. Thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to share it around and hit the thumbs up button. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below or on the side, I'll be around to reply. Thanks once again for watching and I'll see you soon.